My favorite book memory will always be the midnight premiere of the 7th Harry Potter book. My sister and I had been fighting for days over who would get to read it first, since my dad said we were only getting one copy. It was too expensive to get two. I'll never forget getting to the register and having him give the clerk our name and saying he had reserved 2 copies. My sister and I exploded with gratitude, and we both devoured the book in a single night.
The very first book that I read in English was Paper Towns by John Green, and I was really proud of myself when I finished that book because English is not my native tongue. And since then, learning languages through reading books holds a special place in my heart.
When I was in 5th grade, I was reading Harry Potter for the first time, and I was getting towards the end of the first book, and my parents and I had to drive somewhere at night, and I didn't want to stop reading because it was getting so good. So I had my book open and I read under every streetlight that we passed as much as I could because I just didn't want to stop reading. So that's what I did.
So one of my favorite memories of reading is actually reading in my closet, which sounds super creepy, but as a kid I just always felt super alone and misunderstood, and I would go in my closet and I would read these books, and I became best friends with the characters. And so at my school we would have this event called the Scholastic Book Fair where students could buy books. So I would go and I would buy a bunch of books, and then I would just sit down and read in my closet, and I never felt alone there.
When I was about 9 or 10, I think it was, the Series of Unfortunate Events book, the 3 books that were all in one book, came out, and my mum took me to go and buy it. And then every other time another book was released in the series, she'd let me have the day off school so we could go to the bookstore, get it together, and then I would spend the whole day reading.
When I was 11, I read the Twilight book, New Moon, for the first time, and I cried for about an hour when Edward had left right at the beginning and threw my book across the room, and my mom came in to ask me why I was crying. I told her that it was because Edward left, and she laughed at me because there's still 2 books left, so obviously he comes back. And after a moment I laughed too, and that's still something that we laugh about to this day.
My favorite book memory would probably be when I was in primary school, and at my school library you were only allowed to take out 2 books at a time, and I was desperate to read 3 books, and so I snuck an extra one into my book bag, and when my teacher found out that I had taken out more books than I was allowed, I got in so much trouble, and that was how the book addiction started.
Years ago, when I graduated high school, my dad gifted me his copies of Lord of the Rings, and I know how many times he read them in his life, and you can see how loved those books are, so that meant the world to me.
One of my favorite book memories is from when I was really little. My dad and I used to play this game called Library, where I would literally just make him check out the same ratty old copy of Gulliver's Travels over and over again. I would make him sign it out, and I would stamp it and everything. And I think that's especially funny since now I am 20 years old and studying to be a librarian.
My favorite book memory is from reading the last Harry Potter. It was 3 a.m. at my house, and I read that scene where Ron and Hermione kiss for the first time, and I was just so overwhelmed. I went to wake up my sister, and I thought she was going to be really mad because it was 3 a.m. and I was waking her up about a book that she wasn't reading. But she was really happy too. So we were dancing and screaming at her room at 3 a.m. because of a book. It was blissful joy.
My boyfriend isn't much of a reader, but we went to the bookstore because he wanted to pick the next book that I was going to read, and he wanted to pick the weirdest book that he could find. So he pulled out a copy of Sense and Sensibility and Sea Monsters, and he would come over and I would read little sections of it, and he would lay on my lap and fall asleep, and still, it is one of my most prized possessions, especially my most prized book.
I had a book by Brandon Sanderson, one of my favourite authors, and it was a signed copy. My partner took it on a work trip with him and he left it on a bus in a different state, and I was devastated. But he ended up contacting Brandon Sanderson's team, and because it was a fairly unique situation and he felt really guilty, he ended up getting a different copy. Not only did he replace it with another signed copy, he also got it personalised, and it also arrived on my birthday coincidentally, so I'd say he more than made up for losing my copy in the first place.
About 5 years ago, I was scrolling through Tumblr, being the Sarah J. Maas trash that I am, when I got a message from a girl named Bree. We got to talking about Sarah J. Maas and books in general and really hit it off. She lived in Missouri at the time, but we talked every day. Long story short, she came to visit me in Florida 2 years ago to meet me in person, and now I'm in her wedding. If it wasn't for our mutual love of Sarah J. Maas, we never would have met.